Hello, everyone, and thank you so much for joining us at our Veeam session at Microsoft Ignite. My name is Leah Troscianecki. I am the Principal Product Marketing Manager covering our Microsoft Azure solutions, and I'm joined today by Edward Watson, who is also the Principal Product Marketing Manager for Microsoft 365 solutions. So we will be your dynamic duo today for our super fast presentation. And our goal today is to help folks really get prepared for the BCDR needs of 2024. So we're going to walk you guys through some of the top trends that we're seeing, what we're hearing from organizations that are likely like your own, that are faced with budget challenges and cybersecurity threats and looking to modernize so many of the tools and techniques that they use to back up so many of their new Microsoft cloud workloads. And really pulling that into their data estate from data center to edge to, of course, cloud, SaaS, IaaS, PaaS, all the different as a service models. We're even going to throw in a new one in today's session. So that's a fun sneak peek for an exciting announcement that we have. Now, if you're familiar with Veeam, I really encourage you to stick around because we are actually going to talk about a very cool, very exciting new announcement from the Veeam team. But with that, I'm going to hand it over to Edward to go ahead and get us started to talk a little bit about what we expect to be some of the top challenges for 2024.
Absolutely. Thanks, Leah. So in the past 12 months, we've actually seen 53% of organizations have had some sort of either data loss or corruption incident for the software as a service applications. These are applications that are occasionally overlooked when it comes to a lot of these data loss challenges and really the need for protecting the data. Probably the more scariest stat is less than 25% of organizations are actually able to recover 100% of specifically their Microsoft 365 data during a data loss incident. So that either they don't have the right tools in place or the native capabilities, or they simply don't have a backup in place or the right backup in place. So those are real concerns that we're seeing, at least on the SaaS side of the house. Leah.
Yeah, and on the cloud side of the house, of course, it's a lot of the same challenges around data loss, but really top of mind is all about cybersecurity and especially ransomware attacks. Of course, there's many different kinds of cybersecurity attacks, but I think the proliferation of ransomware just in the last few years has really ramped that up and up and up to the top of so many people's lists of things that they need to be solving for. And we're going to talk a little bit about some of the teams that get involved in that solution. But to start, one kind of thing that I wanted to point out here is I think a lot of folks really think of ransomware and they focus their efforts on on-premises environments, especially because so many of those workloads are legacy. I know a lot of folks go to trade shows. A lot of us spend a lot of time in Las Vegas, and I'm sure a lot of folks were really keying in on that major MGM attack that happened just, I guess, a couple of months ago. And a lot of the attack points that came in there were some of those on-premises environments, but what we're continuing to find when we analyze and do some of these forensic analysis on ransomware attacks is that cloud environments are getting affected almost at the same rate as on-premises environments. So if teams, and especially Azure engineers, Azure architects who may be on the line today, if you aren't thinking about how you might recover in the face of a ransomware attack, now is the time to start planning for that. Because when we did a recent survey of many central IT and cloud teams, we asked questions about ransomware attacks and asked, hey, what happened on-prem? Hey, what happened in the cloud? And when there was an attack that affected the cloud, we asked them how much of your data was affected in that attack. And it was 63% of respondents that said half or more of their data was affected. And of course, when you take that one step further and asked, okay, well, were you able to recover? Because of course, there's two parts of the equation. What happened to that data? And of course, there's lots of amazing security solutions that Microsoft creates. There are plenty of third-party vendors that they partner with to do that kind of analysis. But the flip side of that is the recovery plan. Can you recover and avoid paying the ransom? And the reality is so many organizations simply can't because too much of their data is unrecoverable. So we're going to talk about how you might be able to solve for that in 2024. But one final thing I wanted to kind of put as an earworm in is talking about budgets, because of course we can't talk about planning without talking about budgets. And every year we like to internally at the Veeam team look at a report that Flexera creates called the State of the Cloud. And every year security has been at the top of that list. But for the 2023 report, for the first time ever, managing cloud costs was at the top of that list. And I think that applies for workloads hosted in the cloud, but also using cloud storage. For example, if you were to back up Microsoft 365 workloads, we have to really be talking about how we can control bill shock. That's something that's unique to the cloud space, right? If you're doing on-premises storage, you have that capital expenditure and you know in advance what you're planning for. In the cloud, it's amazing what can happen when that bill suddenly balloons and you're wondering, how do we bring these costs down to something more predictable? So we're going to talk more about that today. With that, I wanted to talk a little bit about the team that you might need to put together here, because I know Microsoft Ignite is really trying to bring together so many different kinds of IT disciplines. So whether you're in the modern workspace and you work with Microsoft 365, whether you're on the cloud side of the business, whether you're in central IT, maybe you're even in security, there's a kind of an interesting intersection with Ignite because there's so many different solutions that Ignite likes to talk about. But even at Veeam, we spend a lot of time talking about how it affects all these different kinds of disciplines within IT. Now, for 30 plus years, the backup category has existed and we've primarily dealt with central IT teams. And typically there will be some sort of backup expert, whether that's their full-time job or it's, part of their data center admin job. But what we're finding is as workloads increasingly move to SaaS, to IaaS, to PaaS, containers, whatever, the backup responsibility is traveling with that specific role. And so what we're finding is there are major gaps in understanding. The backup teams obviously understand backup and the decades of best practices that come with that. But then the M365 teams, the cloud teams, they understand the unique parameters and the unique needs of the specific apps and infrastructure that they're managing, but they maybe don't have that instantiated backup expertise. So what we're finding is when we're looking at the teams that are deciding what the requirements are and what the plan is to back up M365, to back up Azure, everybody's coming together in a unique way for the first time, I think, ever, really. We're only seeing this trend just in the last few years. And these stats come from a recent Cloud Protection Trends report that we create every single year. But frankly, I could pull up 5 or 6 different anecdotes too of organizations that we worked with in last year that have pulled in each of these individuals. So whatever role you play in the equation, you might want to start thinking about how you can bring more and more folks into the equation to start planning for 2024. And Edward, part of that, I think, is because of Microsoft's own shared responsibility model and really trying to hone in on exactly what's the organization's job and what's Microsoft's job. Do you want to walk us through that?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think this misconception is still pervasive, but I think really maybe it's become less so in recent years as people really accept protecting cloud-based workloads. But in general, I think there's still many organizations that have a hard time wrapping their head around the idea that, maybe their assumption is that still the data and the infrastructure are underneath the same umbrella or protected, or their data is somehow available or backed up by Azure and Microsoft 365, and that's all kind of under one cloud service. But the reality of the situation on the next slide here is that ultimately there is this separation of responsibilities where the data really is under the responsibility of the customer underneath the user, and they really need to ensure that that's protected, that they can recover that data, that that's available and is really under the control of the organization. Whereas, of course, Azure, Microsoft 365, they keep the uptime and resiliency of the cloud services, and they have the mechanisms in place to really ensure that uptime of the infrastructure. So Microsoft have provided that shared responsibility model documentation and really try to help organizations understand this reality. So as we go through the slides, I think it'll all become pretty clear as to why this matters.
And certainly Microsoft's not unique, right? When we look at what other cloud providers are doing, what other SaaS providers are doing, they all have similar shared responsibility models. So while there are native tools to protect some of these SaaS applications, some of these infrastructure as a service offerings, I think a lot of organizations are seeing real value in offloading a lot of that work to backup experts, to a third-party company who really cuts their teeth on being in the backup space. And of course, with Veeam, we've been around for a while. If you're not familiar with us, we've been around since 2007. We started our specialization in VMware. We really started as a point product. And then once we built and cultivated this incredible community, and if anybody is a Veeam user on the breakout session, again, thank you so much for working with us. We love our Veeam community, and we're excited to expand it to include more folks, especially from the Microsoft 365 and Azure sides of the business. But of course, we for a long time have been backing up Hyper-V, Windows Server, Windows machines, even for endpoint management. And all of that can come together within the Veeam data platform for centralized management and even centralized monitoring. We've been doing some incredible R&D to pull a lot of this work into one monitoring and management tool so that teams can come together. They can have this shared responsibility even within their own organization to make sure that recovery from accidental deletion, other kinds of data loss scenarios, but of course, from ransomware attacks, that we're all pulling that responsibility in together and doing so in a way that respects the needs of each kind of workload. So we offer native protection for Microsoft 365, native protection for Azure VMs, file shares, databases. We spend an incredible amount of time working with the Microsoft team to make sure that we're leveraging all of their APIs and we're driving development so that the tool is really doing all the things that you wouldn't want to do yourself. You wouldn't want to take the time to manage yourself. You want to focus on your backup policies, your SLAs, making sure that everything is working effectively. But I think we're doing something recently, speaking of announcements, to make that promise even easier, even more attainable. So, Edward, I think you get the honors to introduce some new offerings from Veeam.
Yes, it's my great pleasure to introduce Cirrus by Veeam. So this is our solution that we came out with, which now offers all of the wonderful things, all of the wonderful capabilities that you get today with Microsoft 365 and Azure protected by Veeam as a service. So, as a company that really keeps our ear to the ground and really ensures we're keeping up with market demand, customer demand, we knew from our research that customers want to leverage the speed and time to value with simple backup, secured and updated for the customer with predictable cloud spend. So we've again come out with this as a service offering for Microsoft 365, really building on our industry-leading capabilities that we've had for over half a decade. And for Microsoft Azure as well. So really providing those native protection capabilities, customizable RPOs, the resiliency without intensive backup or cloud skilling. So again, we're providing you these really simple, easy to use solutions that really don't involve a whole lot of skill on the back end to get up and running. You're simply point, click, and you're in the system. So let's expand on that a little bit.
Yeah. What's really exciting about this announcement is, we've actually purchased a few other companies before. For example, we purchased a company called Kasten a few years ago that specializes in containers and in fact protects Azure Kubernetes service as well. So for any DevOps folks on the breakout session who are looking for a way to migrate and keep data mobile, that Kasten solution is an amazing point solution. And our R&D teams have been doing a great job over the last few years to pull in key elements for that central management, central monitoring into the Veeam backup and replication kind of core console. What's different from that to this kind of acquisition, this kind of announcement is this is actually an organization that's been using Veeam software in their service. And we are acquiring their IP and a lot of their staff members so that we can go to market with new models. So this isn't some kind of bolted on thing, which might make sense for containers, but for something as important as Azure or M365, really core to what your organization might do, it didn't make sense to just go slap something onto our portfolio and say, oh, there it is. This is built on Veeam software. So now what we can offer is 3 go-to-market models. So of course, if you feel like you don't have these skilling gaps, if your team feels like they can handle everything and they want to be able to customize things for their own needs, then go software only. The software is available on the Microsoft Azure portal. On the Microsoft Azure Marketplace in a BYOL model. So you can go to your Veeam reseller, purchase licenses, and install those license keys in the Microsoft Azure Marketplace, and you're ready to go. But of course, you would need to handle that deployment, setting everything up, making sure everybody has the right access controls, all that sort of stuff. So what's going to be really nice about Cirrus by Veeam is we now have a Veeam backup as a service. So you can actually go to the Microsoft Azure Marketplace, got it right that third time of saying it, go to the Microsoft Azure Marketplace, and you can actually transact directly through the marketplace. So if you're looking to burn down a Mac agreement or anything like that, you're going to be able to do that directly in the marketplace. And of course, a lot of these tasks are automated for you. It's automatically deployed. It's going to be patched for you, which, of course, for any folks that have to go anywhere near security, you know that dealing with patches is such a massive pain. Having something that's continuously versioned can be such a huge game changer for teams so that you don't have to think about backup. Because at the end of the day, there's all sorts of plausible issues that can happen in 2024 around data loss, cybersecurity attacks. But we recognize that backup is not what you want to be doing on a day-to-day basis. We recognize that Microsoft and the Microsoft Cloud especially unlocks so much potential for your organization. So we want you to free up funds. We want you to free up time to go innovate and do the things you need to do for your organization. Backup as a service gets that done. But if you want to go even further, Veeam actually has a network of over 10,000 service provider partners that build backup as a service managed for you. So you can actually check out veeam.com and go find one of our service provider partners, especially for those who might be joining us from different kinds of countries. You can find a local provider, somebody who speaks your language, somebody who can get in there and offer even white glove services to set backup policies, to optimize your spend, to make sure everything's running efficiently for you. And they could do even more than, of course, the Microsoft services too. So you could do a full stack of managed backup as a service for all of your applications and data. So we really do it all, which is great. I think we want to, at the end of the day, give you options. But of course, Edward, the Cirrus products are very cool and they unlock lots of great capabilities. So go ahead and walk us through that.
They really do. And, I think what makes this so great is that we've really established ourselves as, for Microsoft 365, really the number one in the space in terms of the amount of users, 17 million users protected to date. And now we're combining that really industry-leading solution that we have and now really matching that with the ease and use and simplicity that customers expect from a BaaS solution. So really delivering that, again, the base product, which is, the customizable backups they get, the 50+ recovery options, the powerful search, you've got Veeam One monitoring capabilities as well. And you take all of that, all of what makes Veeam so great for M365, and then you just simplify it. You simplify your backup strategy with this new as a service model. You get the software, the service, the storage, all in one, included in one price. And you take that solution and we've given it a modern and much more secure, modern look, made it much more secure, much more intuitive. And you don't have to worry about any of the back end stuff. That's what I love about that. It's just easy to use, simple. You can get up and running very quickly and you're just running your backups. That's what organizations care about today, or a good majority of them. I just want to simply point, click, run my backup and get on with the rest of my day. And we allow that very clearly with this solution. So next, let's actually take a look at this solution. So what I love about Cirrus for Microsoft 365 is the fact that you get this really, really easy to view, easy to use dashboard. So right at a glance, you can see your backup status. That's the most important thing. Do I have any errors? How many restore points? When was my last backup? Check out our protected accounts, the total accounts protected in that. And of course, retention. What's our target? Where are we currently at? What's our oldest retention? Our progress towards retention, right? Next, we can look at license activity. What's active versus inactive, and actually drill down and see how many users we actually have protected. Next, of course, storage used, very important, right? Which of the users are actually consuming the most storage, right? Application view, Outlook, OneDrive, SharePoint, Teams. We can explore the individual backed up data within each of those applications and check out the recent user activity for each of those in terms of those restore sessions. Backup jobs, we can dive right into those. We can go into a search where we can filter down. We can again explore the Outlook, OneDrive, SharePoint, individual backups, as well as view any notifications, settings, and of course, any support that we need for assistance as well. So with that, let's go to Azure.
Amazing. So now that you've seen how amazing the user interface is, I think it's pretty easy to understand that ultimately with this solution, it's going to be quick ROI, right? When you're in a software only model, it takes a while to deploy and integrate things. And of course, Microsoft Azure makes it easy for you to import your subscription information and discover workloads, but it still takes time. So having a simple interface that kind of cuts out a lot of the decisions and just focuses you in on exactly what you need to do, it's just going to help you realize that value so much faster. So we're going to do the same point and click in just a minute on the Cloud Protect for Microsoft Azure solution. But for those who aren't familiar, Veeam Backup for Microsoft Azure, which is the underpinning software of this offering, is a great way for organizations of all sizes, but especially for those who need a lot of scale, to leverage the best practices of backup and security, as well as FinOps. We spent a lot of time talking about cloud FinOps, and I mentioned earlier that so many organizations have managing cloud spend really top of mind for what they're trying to execute in 2024. Veeam Backup for Microsoft Azure is really built with that well-architected framework in mind. So we're going to leverage things like Azure Immutable Storage for Azure Blob. We can leverage archives so that you can pull things down into lower and lower cost storage and ultimately manage those SLAs that you need to kind of navigate, all of which will make recovery just a much more seamless process, especially because you can enable so many different kinds of users. So whether you're the primary Azure engineer or you need to enable somebody in DevOps to be able to do some granular recoveries, ultimately it's a really seamless process, but it gives you so much more flexibility than something like scheduling snapshots would. So you really get to have all of the best of it, but of course in that as a service model. So let's take a look. As you can see, it's that very similar UI. So especially if a lot of your teams work closely together, you're not going to have a lot of differences between the UIs. And frankly, ours is even a little simpler in some ways because it focuses you in on executing a lot of the remediation of any sort of failure of jobs. You can see exactly what is protected. So VMs, Azure SQL, Azure Files. And of course, those session logs are a really big part of this. So you're going to be able to see exactly what those backup jobs that you've executed have been. Was it successful? If it wasn't, what do I need to remediate? What is that point in time? Is there any sort of gap in my planning? Which is a great way to do that morning cup of coffee dashboard. And then ultimately, if you do need to make any sort of changes, you can see here in this sort of click through that you can go in and set policies, change backup copy jobs. And of course, respond to things like notifications. You can pull logs. I know, especially for folks who are interested in any kind of security best practices, pulling those logs is going to be a great way because it's that syslog process to pull everything out. So you can see it's just this really simple interface that makes it so easy for you to use backup as a service within your Azure organization. And ultimately, I think that means freedom of choice, right, Edward?
Yeah, absolutely. So just to reiterate, guys, now we have 3 options. And, I think that's what organizations are really looking for, right, Leah? They're looking for just the freedom of choice, whether self-managed, do it ourselves, as a service, some offloading versus full offloading to one of our valued service provider partners. So we do hope that you have enjoyed this session. We're going to wrap up here. Leah, why don't you take us through what folks can do for us here?
Yeah, absolutely. I hope you did enjoy the session. And no matter what, good, bad, or indifferent, fill out the eval. I think we always appreciate as a vendor to hear back from the audience. I think there's something like 260,000 virtual attendees planned for Microsoft Ignite. So I'm so excited to see who's going to get a chance to check out this breakout session and if you found it valuable. Of course, we do have a virtual booth for those of you who are attending virtually. We also have some in-person experiences for any folks who might be joining us in Seattle as well. And of course, you can check out Veeam.com for the latest and greatest from Veeam, including our most recent Veeam on Resiliency Summit. So if you want to learn more about cybersecurity best practices and how everybody can upskill together, that's a great offering as well. But with that, I think we'll go ahead and wrap it here. Thank you so much for joining us on the behalf of Edward and myself. We hope you guys have a great rest of your show. Thank you.
Thank you. Bye-bye.